It's Wizards versus Lesbians, a podcast for your ears. Hello, and welcome to Wizards versus Lesbians. My name is Isaac.
I'm Alexis.
And today we are going to do our best to discuss Some Desperate Glory by Emily Tesh, even though we are both very tired and it is too hot.
Yes.
Would you like to do the plot, or shall I?
So, basically, the Earth was in a war with aliens. Earth got nuked. And now we are following Kier, short for Valkyr, who is one of the surviving humans in a space station that is basically a cross between a right-wing militia compound and North Korea. And after they take an alien prisoner, and Kier's brother disappears on a special mission, and Kier, despite being the biggest badass of the child soldiers, has been assigned to breeding duty. She runs away to find her brother and perhaps learn that maybe living in a right-wing militia is not a great idea.
Yes. I would call that last part a spoiler, but it's pretty obvious to everybody but Kier that that's how it's going to go from like the first page of the book.
Right, exactly. Exactly. I feel like, if you've not figured out by the end of the first chapter that one of the major arcs of this character is understanding that everybody hates her and she's terrible because she has been raised as a fanatical child soldier, then I don't know what to say.
Yes, exactly. I don't have anything to add to that. So let me see here. Lesbians in this book, we have them,
yeah.
I believe.
Yeah, Kira's a lesbian.
Mm-hmm. How about wizards?
Well, yes, actually. Because there's the doomsday machine that can completely alter the fabric of reality. And I would argue that the people, human and alien, who become adept at controlling it count as wizards.
Yeah, I
there's
think that
also an abusive, charismatic quasi-father figure. He's only he doesn't actually have any of the special powers that the wizardly people have, but, he's also there. So you've got your wizard figure and then your actual wizards.
And he is trying to take control of that thing.
He is, yes.
So,
yes, he is.
Yeah, okay. Yes, wizards and lesbians in conflict.
Yeah.
We should totally be talking about this book.
Yes.
So why should you read it?
It has some interesting parts.
Yes.
I would call this book an ambitious failure. And which is a little disappointing because I really liked the other things that the duology by the same author, which is completely different. But I think if you like space opera, if you're like really into space opera as a genre, you will enjoy this. And particularly if you're into space opera but you don't like the politics of space opera, of like classic space opera, then you'll really enjoy this because this is very much an interrogation of that.
Yes.
That I think is why you should read this book.
It has a lot of little bits that are nice.
Yes, that's true. It has some very good little observations.
Yes, the problem is that those little bits are stuck in a plot that doesn't really work.
Yeah.
Which is a problem, but
the book feels both too ambitious and yet not ambitious enough.
But if you go in there panning for gold, you'll find some really nice little bits and pieces. And I think the overall message of the book is a good one.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes. That was pretty much already why you shouldn't read it. We kind of just went there already. But this feels like a sort of a post 9/11 action movie.
And also a send-up of, and also like not a send-up, but an interrogation of the post 9/11 action movie genre.
Yeah, it's a bit of a sort of, you can view it as a deconstruction of that, which is actually, that's a good thing, actually.
Right.
Maybe that is a reason to read it rather than a reason not to read it. We're getting everything backwards today.
Yes, but no, I agree. I think that you know, I don't think it's a 100% successful deconstruction, but I think it's a pretty good deconstruction of the of both space opera as a genre and the post 9/11 action movie world, really.
Yes, I agree. And I think you could see this one as a movie.
Honestly, I would totally watch a movie adaptation of this.
Yeah, it has a lot of the sort of stuff that's in vogue right now, from the, how do we deal with the destruction of the temple, post 9/11 thing that every action movie has been about recently. And by recently I mean for the last 20 years.
Right. 22 years at this point.
Yeah, and also the multiverse stuff, which is currently, very much in fashion, and, weird time travel shenanigans. So, yeah, no, if you don't like that kind of thing, and I don't, even if it's a deconstruction, you might want to steer clear.
I don't like it, but I would have liked a deconstruction of it, except that I feel like it never really quite transcends the limitations of the thing that it's deconstructing.
Yes, I agree completely. Boy, it's been a while since I read this one, and I'm looking over my notes, and I got really angry when I was finished with this. I think I'm remembering liking this book more than I actually did, if this is anything to go by.
That does not surprise me. It's funny, I remember liking this book as I read it, feeling very disappointed by... Well, I remember liking this book as I read the, second half. The first half really drags. And
it is also quite long, I should add.
And it is too long. It is absolutely too long. Part of why I would watch the movie version of this is that the movie version would have to cut out a lot of unnecessary stuff. Content warnings.
Oh, actually, though,
okay.
one more thing. Based on this note that I'm looking at here, I said, do remember when you're tearing this to pieces that you did happily listen to all 15 hours of it, and I did. It is very, very long, but it does keep moving at a decent enough clip that it's not a pain to get through, and it's not badly written,
Yeah.
So there's that.
Yeah.
All right, yes, but content warnings. Well, cult indoctrination and deprogramming, obviously, is the big one.
There's reference to child sexual abuse, not of
definitely
the main character, but of another character. There's reference to this book is very upfront about all of the
what tends to happen when you put what tends to happen in charge.
Yeah. Well, it's. I think that this book is very clear about what tends to happen both in fascist states where women have a reproductive role and that's about it, and also what happens in charismatic cults.
Yes. So plenty of that. It's quite bleak in that way. There's torture of the fluffiest boy,
Torture of the absolute fluffiest boy, committed by the protagonist.
Indeed. So yeah, it's unpleasant. It's a pretty unpleasant book. So take that for what it's worth as well. Yeah. I'm sure I'm missing something, but we're both tired. We're doing our best here, guys.
Forgive us. What? I don't feel too bad because the book has a page of content, has a big paragraph.
Oh, that's right, it does. So. Which is I remember that, and I was happy. I mean, it actually made me think about content warnings, because that content warning page up front both provides content warnings, but also is like a just in case we think that we're supposed to be on board with Valkyr at the beginning of this book. Remember. The author has good politics. They put this up front, so just be patient.
Yeah, it is a very useful being like, don't worry, this is a deconstruction of space opera. But also, honestly, it helps set the tone for what you're going to read, because I picked this up mostly because I enjoyed the rather, despite the fact that it involves a serial killer, fairly fluffy gay duology. That by the author, and so it was really useful having this sort of, this is what the tone is going to be like.
Indeed. All right, so shall we head along to discuss it?
Let's.
Spoiler zone. Okay. So where to even begin? let's start with stuff that we liked. How's about?
Oh, right.
And then move on from there.
I know that you sent me an irritated message when you got to the first universe reset, but I have to say that the chapters, right, especially that middle section where they do, it's not actually the middle section, it's well over halfway through the book, where they do the first universe reset, is I think one of the more interesting sections in the book.
Agreed. Yeah.
Both, she stops. It stops being a critique for a little while. It stops being a social critique of right-wing militias, which I think we're all on board with them being bad at, and starts being an empathetic yet fairly biting critique of ineffectual liberalism.
Yes, no, everybody gets a kicking in this book. There's no question about that.
And also, I actually found, and then when Valley and Kier get, when Val gets the memories of Kier, Val having grown up as an honor student in a society where humans are the privileged class as opposed to where and just watching her two selves cringe at each other constantly was really actually good, well done, I thought.
Yes.
Including the way that Val, who's been raised with a good education and has reasonably good politics, if far too pro-military, you can see all the ways in which she's still not a particularly good person by what she is and isn't cringing about.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think that I was going to say that I think that my favorite part of this book is the characterization.
Yes.
And the timeline reset gimmick, which gives us multiple versions of the same character, does mean that we have the fun thing of seeing how certain personality traits might play themselves out in different circumstances.
Yes.
And while Valley and Valkyr are about as different as two people can be in terms of their social backgrounds, they are both insufferable, stupid, blinkered overachievers.
Yes.
And just watching the way that plays out between the two of them, particularly when the two of them come into conflict, it is really funny watching the two of them be snotty and superior at each other inside her own brain.
Yeah, inside her own brain, because it's not like the two, the universe, it's a universe reset, and so what happens is just Valerie gets the memories of Valkyr, and and as the two personalities are attempting to mesh, they're both just have incredible contempt for each other. And it's fun because you get to see how her frenemy relationship could have been a warm, fairly warm, collegial, making fun of each other frenemy relationship instead of the just bitter, awful thing that it is in the, militia environment.
Yes. Although, they also, it's still kind of toxic.
It is. The thing is, it's still kind of toxic, right? They're still pretty mean to each other, but they have a certain degree of, Val has a friend, and yes, it's exactly. A friendship. Yes, it's a friendship and mostly built on rivalry, but they do actually seem to care about each other, even if it's just sort of, wow, you've got a date? Really? Tell me about it.
Yeah. And I like that, their relationship, there's a certain, because there's also, in both cases, sorry, what's the name of her friend?
Cleo?
Cleo, that's right. There's a racial dynamic to it in both universes.
There is, yeah.
Which also, good on this book for, acknowledging that race exists in a space opera. That's a relatively rare thing.
Right, and particularly because, there's a lot of things where the dynamics between humans and aliens in both universes map onto, different kinds of racial dynamics. But it's also made clear the humans are also still just have racism as a problem.
Yes, the new human survivalist militia cult does also happen to be white supremacist.
As you may have been able to guess by the fact that, their star...
She's called Valkyr.
Right. Her brother's called Magnus, I think.
Like, Valkyr's pig-headed obliviousness actually works in her favor in both cases. Because, like, she doesn't even notice that there's a racial component to their relationship, even when they're in the white supremacist cult.
Right.
And, sort of just bulldozes over that with her liberalism in the other universe
right,
as well.
Exactly. And one of the things I actually really liked about their relationship, which I think is one of the more interesting relationships in the book, at least of Valkyr's, is the way that they genuinely seem to like each other, even if they're pretty mean to each other in the Earth Doesn't Get Destroyed universe. But in the militia universe, Cleo at least genuinely hates Valkyr, and for good reason.
Yes.
But it's the militia universe militia universe Cleo. Cleo is not willing to back up Valerie with this whole, turns out my brother has joined an alien terrorist cult, and also we may need to reset the universe again thing. She's not willing to do that as Cleo. Like, they have a much warmer friendship, but Militia Cleo, despite hating her, is like, fine, I have your back, even though I still hate you.
Yes. Part of me thinks that Cleo's behavior can be more easily understood as fulfillment of action movie math. Certain number of characters have to arrive in the nick of time to imperil or save the protagonist. And Cleo is a tweener, so whichever way she chooses will work out to make the math work. Particularly when she just doesn't do anything. No, this is all good stuff. Like, yes. I feel like, pretty much everything that I really like about this book comes down to little character interactions and interpersonal dynamics.
Yeah.
I love how, like, both self-righteous and brittle Val's sister is, who, after she has done the incredibly brave and, like, nearly impossible thing of escaping the cult with the cult leader's kid.
Yes, with her kid.
Her kid, who's the cult leader's kid, who he had been grooming her since she was a small child. And, when, like, the combination of, the whole scene where Val goes into her house and is like, where Valkyr goes into her house and they're talking past each other for a moment until the sister realizes that Val has not actually also escaped. And
right.
Val realizes that her sister is not actually a double agent working for the cult. That was an incredible scene. Like, just modulating the tone of love and distrust and frustration.
Yes. And it's another moment where, I mean, I feel like when you're reading the book, you hear Valkyr talk about, oh, Uncle, Commander Uncle Joel loves us so much. He gives us all the special attention. Our sister even got to sleep in his room. Right.
I mean, this is actually one of those cases where the fact that we figure out everything that's going on much faster than Val does is perfect, because it's the whole point is that it's really, really obvious to anybody outside the situation what's going on. And Val, despite being, a straight A student in both universes, can't see it.
Right, because the thing that the drive that makes her a straight A student is the absolute drive to be praised for succeeding.
Right, exactly. And so, like, her entire personality hinges on it. And I love that, she doesn't have to be, like, kidnapped and cult deprogrammed in order to, start seeing her way out of it. She's just like, it's the fact that she's left alone to think, and she just hates it that she's been left alone to think. And her brain keeps, bringing things up to her, and she's like, shut the fuck up, stop thinking about this.
The thing is that she is intelligent and, and has been she's been trained to swallow all this propaganda, but she's also been trained to be observant and creative. Because, she's just running the doomsday simulation, all these battle simulations over and over and over again. And there's the great thing where Avi needs to distract her while he's hacking, and so he just dumps her, while she's in the simulation. So he just dumps her into some like bootleg World of Warcraft mod that he's made up, and he's actually impressed that she's being creative, even if she is beating the orcs up with the wizard staff. She's doing it in a creative way.
Yes. Let's talk about Avi.
Yeah, let's talk about Avi because another interesting thing. I mean, Avi and Kier are definitely the central characters of this book, even though we only ever get Kier's viewpoint. But you really get to see the ways in which, in both universes, both of them are just so deeply broken.
Yes. The Bad Gaze podcast, which I've referenced on this podcast before, has a phrase which seemed apropos here, which is evil twink energy, which it applies to people like Heliogabalus and various court favorites from down through the years. Heliogabalus might not have been gay, but he was beautiful and sexy, and he might have been transgender, so look kindly upon all of the people he dismembered before he was thrown into a river. Or she, who knows. And, or Bozy, I think, is the archetypal evil twink energy.
Hashan.
And, say what?
Qianlong, the Qianlong
yes,
emperor.
Yes, also that.
Hashan.
Also that. Yeah. And not the original, obviously, but maybe the one. But Bozy may be the one who's most familiar to us in a contemporary setting. But yes, Hashan as well. And I think that this book is setting him up to be that person on purpose, with the fact that the first thing that he does when he gets or one of the first things that he does when he gets access to the God Machine is, I will make flowers and a tiger.
Right.
I'm going full Roman emperor here. I'm going to drown my party guests in flower petals before I loose my tiger upon them.
Yes.
And he is a deeply unhappy little shithead, is Avi.
In both cases, and it's
in both cases.
And it's like the thing is that with both of them, partly it's that they're both intelligent people who, in both universes, their adult figures just utterly failed them.
Yeah. And so he's had to rely on his own intelligence as being like the only worthwhile thing about him, which makes him completely insufferable.
Yes.
And a classic narcissistic psychopath.
Yes. Also the fact that, being the really obviously gay nerd in the right-wing militia doom cult space station is not a great situation.
Yeah, no, he's clearly his life has taught him nothing but to resent, to hide, and to hate. Which on the, for the plus side, for our purposes, makes him pretty happy to go along with, these plans that are almost certainly going to end with all of them dying, because, what else does he have to do to look forward to?
Right.
But it is telling that he is much worse in the universe where they have a use for him and value him, the people in charge.
Yes, but that's partly because he's under, he's come to the attention of good old Uncle Joel.
Yes, but when Uncle Joel actually, sees something useful in him,
right,
he becomes much, much worse. In the same way that sort of,
in the same way that
Valkyr,
sort of
what happens to Val, exactly.
Right, as Valkyr, she's had, the personal attention of Admiral Joel, and thus she's a terrible fanatic shithead. And as Valerie, she's just, a straight A student, and she's really obnoxious, but, she's definitely much more thoughtful. And, she's capable of going on a date with somebody, first of all, but also going on a date with somebody who doesn't like her politics and going, well, then why don't we change the subject instead of continuing to argue about this?
Yes, indeed. Oh, poor what's her face,
Poor
the girl
Lisa.
who's, yeah,
Lisa,
poor
Lisa
Lisa in
Bet.
both universes, the doormat.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a little, it's definitely, it was a little sad that that relationship did not, and that character just didn't get developed very much. Um,
Yeah, it's sort of important that she be what Val thinks she is, for the plot, which is kind of unfortunate, because I think that it would have been better to have been able. I would have liked to have seen a little bit of what the universe looked like from her perspective. You know,
yeah.
as someone who's been told you're going to go into like the breeding, thing, and everybody knows you're going into the breeding thing because you like kids, and which means that you're about to get raped by old men a whole lot,
Right.
and that's your life.
And that's
But
your life, except that your best friend, who everybody except her knows is in love with you, keeps insisting that no, she's going to make sure you make it into the military by sheer force of will, even though you have no interest in that.
yes, and who shows her her love for you by hazing and bullying you relentlessly.
Right.
Yeah, I don't quite know who Lisa is, in the real world, besides being somebody who's cartoonishly good. And so, I would have liked maybe a little bit more than that, but I also don't know where we would have put anymore.
Yeah, it's
in
true.
this book. So.
I feel like, honestly, though, I feel like I would have liked to see the first militia section and even like the post escape from the militia section. Each of those sections could have been cut in half, I think. We did not need quite as much of Kier's internal monologue about how right she is and how confusing it is that the world is not quite conforming to that.
Yeah, because I mean, on the one hand, yes, it makes sense that we get this faster than Kier does, but did we have to get it that much faster than
Right.
Kier did? Because we're still sitting around waiting for Kier to twig to what's going on around her for a long time.
It takes so long for them to get off the space station, and then there's this long period of, like, then she just sort of drifts aimlessly for a while before she, finds Avi, and then it takes so long for Avi to, like, get control of the machine that just...
Yeah. I did like the drifting aimlessly part, actually, just because I thought her resentment for the comfort around her was pretty well drawn.
That definitely was, and the way that she and Avi are both... she and Avi, who have such completely different takes on militia life, are just both equally infuriated and horrified by all of the people who want to treat them as refugees.
Yes. That seemed very well observed. But yeah, we could definitely have done with less of the initial station setting. Because I also, like, you noted that I messaged you being like, oh God, it's this thing when the universe reset happened.
Right.
I didn't end up minding that.
I thought the universe reset was when I started to actually like the book.
Well, I mean, it was, part of it was just that, like, part of it was at that point I was like, oh my God, there's going to be so much more of this now. Mm-hmm. But also, there's also clearly an element of post-Homestuck stress disorder in this reaction. I think that it was important. I think that whether I was going to be able to stand this book or not sort of hinged on whether it was going to be able to accept the destruction of Earth.
Uh-huh.
And it was. And the book is about having to accept the destruction of Earth, and move on.
Yes,
and,
though actually I want to talk about that because I feel like I have mixed feelings about how the book handled that.
Okay.
Because
let's talk about it.
Because I think you're right. I think that this is partly supposed to be a book about how do you accept the genocide of your people and move on because there's no other alternative. You look at the alternative and the alternative is as bad or worse.
Yes.
And, and that's, for one thing, I read this book and I was like, I would be shocked if the author was a huge fan of, dropping the nuclear bombs on Japan, but this is very much a book arguing in favor of that.
Yes, it is.
Like, it is absolutely. And so I thought that was really interesting, but I wasn't sure if the narrative was aware that that's what it was arguing.
Yeah, and because it's not a one-to-one with the dropping of the bomb on Japan.
No, there's still a country of Japan in a way that
Right.
there isn't an Earth. But
Exactly. But it's also very much the first things that our minds are going to go to. I mean, it's obviously the first thing my mind went to as well.
Well, I mean, it's very specifically, it is a story about two major powers battling, and the one that's, the one that is more actively fascist and genocidal getting a huge life-destroying weapon dropped on them.
Yes. I mean, when you start peeling that metaphor back further, it falls apart. But that is very much the first thing that the reader is going to be hit with.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, you've even got your right-wing militias. The main difference is that, the Japanese right wing has mostly been confined to really obnoxious parades.
Yes. I mean, there's nothing that right-wing militias like more than really obnoxious parades.
Right.
But it ended up, I ended up liking to think of it more, and again, this doesn't work either, but I was like, I said the destruction of the temple earlier when I was talking about 9/11, and it did. I found the sort of it easier to take talking about a people in diaspora. If I thought about it in terms of like
your
Judaism,
people in diaspora.
Sorry, folks. What? Say what?
You find it a little bit easier to think about your people in diaspora.
Exactly.
After,
you know how it is. We were, how we were destroyed because, the good and wise aliens decided that was the best thing to do.
Yeah, I'm not really sure if, the thing is that, again, this falls apart pretty fast because I don't feel like the aliens don't in any way act like the Romans. It's not like, there's no arch of Titus.
In any way act like anybody.
Yeah, which is part of the problem is that, for a story that's supposed to be about, humanity accepting their genocide and nonetheless joining the galactic community, you get no sense whatsoever of the galactic community.
Right. And the problem is also, we repeatedly wipe out the galactic community, but we have no real basis on which to care about the galactic community apart from numbers.
Right.
Numbers of sentient creatures, which is like, I mean, it is difficult to care on that scale after a certain point.
Right. And so, I felt like, but my other problem was that I didn't actually feel like, and I think that, again, this is because, the book was not willing to commit. The book was not willing to say, yes, you just have to accept your genocide and move on. The reasons that they accept the destruction of Earth are largely because it doesn't occur to anybody to, when resetting the universe, just shoot Admiral Joel in the head.
Right, exactly. It's not like
that would have fixed, fixed the problem.
You did have access to a god machine, you guys.
Right, you have access to a god machine. And I guess that is the thing, is that you have access to a god machine. Part of the thing about accepting genocide is the fact that you can't go back and undo it.
I don't know. It's a little on the great man theory side for me. The zeitgeist would have spawned another Admiral Joel. So use the geist in the machine to change the zeit. Right, exactly. And it's kind of a nested series of fantasies is the way that I ended up thinking about the book. It's like you're encountering a historical atrocity, like you're Jeff Mangum reading about Anne Frank.
Yes.
And
I do hope that you now insert a jingle.
You wish you could save her in some sort of time machine. Yes.
Well, just and generally inspired by. I really look forward to the Neutral Milk Hotel inspired jingle in this episode.
Inspired. Okay, got it. Jeff Mangum style parody coming down the pipe. What if Jeff Mangum had happened to fixate on some other underage dead girl from history? Weirdly incestuous songs about Joan of Arc, here masturbating alone in a trailer park, having transtemporal lesbian love affairs with Mary, Queen of Scots, with Mary Antoinette, having strange visions of sweater-clad hippies descending to save her in a fireproof DeLorean. Say what you want to say, it's still a classic, but it's weird that nobody talks about how strange it is to be sexually interested in Anne Frank. But anyway, so your first thing is, okay, I'm going to go back. I'm going to fantasize about going back and killing Hitler, and, although they should have killed Hitler here instead of what they ended up actually doing.
Part of the thing is that the way that this thing is set up, killing Hitler would actually have solved the problem, which again, is where the metaphorical weight argument of the book starts to break down. Sorry.
Right, and also, it's okay. And but then there's the second reset, which is, okay, you're not going back in time to kill Hitler. We're going back in time to save my child self. Right. I'm going to give my former self like the education and the insight that I would have needed to have been a better person and to do the better thing. Right. But you also can't do that. Is the thing.
Right.
That's also a pipe dream.
Yes. And I think, honestly, part of why I like that section a little bit better is that it does a better job of selling me on that's also impossible.
But she still does it, and that's how she gets the good ending, or the best possible ending.
I think part of the thing is that this book is at its best when it's really focused on individuals, and it starts to fall apart when it tries to step back and look at societies.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I think that for me, the God Machine is sort of emblematic of that. Because the God Machine, if there's one thing in this whole setup that is just straight from Action Movie Central, it's the God Machine.
Right.
And unfortunately, the God Machine looms very large over the last part of the book and the ending.
Yeah.
Which is... And the ending sequence in general, with the action movie callbacks and the dialogue really and the countdown timer that stretches long enough for all of the the quippy stuff and the hand wringing to happen.
Yeah,
and the ending is really bad.
The ending is really bad, and it's as I started this book being at first I started this book being interested, and then I started to get bored, and then I started, when she was starting to go around, her aimless drifting was actually, I think, when I also started to get invested. And then it ends the ending is so bad. And that's again where I feel like the ending is sufficiently bad and sufficiently action movie that it ends up also sort of weakening the message of the book insofar as it has a message.
Yes, I agree completely. It felt like, okay, how would we end this if it were the big climactic sequence of an epic space opera? And badly, it turns out, is the answer to that. And Avi becomes this sort of comic relief, evil sidekick character, right?
Which is really frustrating because it's really frustrating because you get to see the ways in which each of the other characters is flawed, but had potential for something more, and it feels like you almost get that with Avi, and then the end just takes that away. Yes.
And there's an argument to be made that he's just going to be an irredeemable bastard no matter what, but still,
I'm not convinced that people can just be born irredeemable shitheads.
Yeah, no, I'm well. Yeah. This is outside the remit of this podcast, but in my opinion, some folks are just bad. There are some circumstances that cannot be overcome, and sometimes that all happens in the womb. But having the one irredeemable character in your book about Aryan super soldiers be the short one with messy hair and glasses, whose name is Avi, Do we have to keep pointing this out? I don't want our podcast to be the anti-Semitism call-out hour, but if you keep doing it, we keep having to say things about it.
And I mean, and also, honestly, it's not a great look to have, like, you know, the evil twink thing is actually not a great look, I think.
No, I agree. I agree completely. It seems like an archetype that nosed its way in here without the author being fully aware of what was happening.
Right. And it starts to get into the idea that, like, insufficiently masculine men are, you know, are like a threat and, again, irredeemable.
Right. Whereas Magnus, the dumb himbo who has a heart of gold,
but just happens to be gay.
He's the good one, you know.
Right.
Val falls over herself to be like, oh, he was always the good one. He's the best, and also he's an Aryan ideal of perfection and is also gay.
Right. It's just like, you know, it does end up being a little bit frustrating that last section where, you know, the obviously gay nerdy guy turns out to be, again, cartoonishly evil. And the best person in the universe apparently is the kid who was practically bred to be the you know, poster boy for the right wing militia.
Yeah, he's the blonde beast.
Yes, with the exception of being gay.
With the exception of being gay, well, I bet Nietzsche would have been fine with that.
So. Yeah, it's just, and I think part of it's also that ending it on a big action sequence thing ends up somewhat reaffirming the idea, you know, like, why is Valkyr's chance to shine when she gets to be everything that she was trained to be as a child soldier?
Exactly. Like, I thought of all things, I thought of Girl Serpent Thorn when thinking about Val.
Huh.
Because in some ways it's because a lot of Val's, you know, internal time is spent thinking about how she is a weapon and capable of violence. And how like the fact that she was born to be a person who is, or trained to be a person who is primarily capable of violence affects the way that she sees and looks at the world, and her trying to figure out a way for her to be herself, but also not to be a danger to everybody around her and all of this stuff. Mm-hmm. And the ending really undermines that.
It does.
It undermines the work that was put into that.
Right.
Which is a real shame.
It is.
Because before that, I was like, this is a much better look at somebody who is actually dangerous than Girl Serpent Thorn was.
Well, the thing is that Girl Serpent Thorn is more about the sort of liberating power of one's anger. And this is about the ways in which, when you're part of a privileged class, your anger is less liberatory and more dangerous.
Agreed. There are a few like little observations that I liked sort of on a societal level. Speaking of World War II, there was, we have our stab in the back narrative. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of talk about cheating, you know, and how you can only win by cheating and whether cheating is good or not with the God Machine, which I think at the end falls into an incoherent lump of overdetermined metaphors that's trying to go in the same direction both at once. It does sort of, the idea initially is that the simulation that Kier starts in is an impossible one on purpose. It's the Kobayashi Maru from Star Trek.
Right.
Or, as I refer to it in my notes, the Kobayashi Mario, where you're supposed to beat it by cheating, and her brother and his not boyfriend, end up figuring that out. But then, and it's like, in grand action movie style, we keep bringing up the idea of like whether we are cheating or not, or whether cheating is okay or not, and by the end, nobody seems to be aware of what that means or what it's supposed to represent.
Right.
And I want to be like, could you please just put down the idea of justice for a second, you guys, and like honor, and like, particularly once you have the brain of somebody who didn't grow up in this culture in your head, can you just like disregard all of that shit and like maybe look at what the best way to deal with what is actually happening would be, but maybe that's not in her character.
I mean, yeah, that's definitely not in her character. But yeah, it's funny because you mentioned that it's supposed to be this sort of Kobayashi Maru thing, but it's also supposed to be an example of the way that the cult leader is controlling his cult by he sets up the scenario to be impossible so that everybody who tries it can go, oh well, we could never have done better than you. Of course, this was the only way.
None of us could possibly have done better than Joel, our hero. Yes. This is in service to a theme of this book, which is that you can't think your way out of the trap if you don't know what's outside it. Your possibilities are circumscribed by your knowledge and experience, which is often said by people who want an environmental explanation for behavior that is actually the result of direct systemic brutality. It doesn't have to be that complicated. Let's see. I've had enough of AI gods. No more of those, please. They're never good because they don't exist in this world or any other. My favorite AIs are the ones that act like Greek gods, like Durandal from Marathon 2. I like it when they're angry and upset and jealous, and then they go and take it out on you. But let's see here. Do you have any other little details that you would like to talk about?
No, I think I covered most of the things. It's I feel like, I guess the other thing is that Valkyr's parents, their absence is her mother in particular's absence is such a hole in the first part of the book. And then we get so little of her in the other universe, which was a little bit surprising to me. But then I guess that makes sense, right? I mean, if you grow up lacking parents or, then parents become a huge thing. And if you grow up with your parents, then yeah, whatever, you'll call them sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I don't mind that because also her parent in both universes is like an admiral. And I imagine that you don't have a lot of time to interact with your child, whether you're dead or alive, if you are an admiral, particularly if you are a female admiral in a sexist culture.
Right. No, that's a good point. I did like the scene. I definitely liked the scene in the restaurant where, some aliens, the full restaurant, some aliens see them come in and start to get up, and she's like, "No, we'll sit at the bar," and the aliens are like, "No, we were leaving anyway." So that they don't have to get kicked off the table. And instead of going, no, we're still going to sit at the bar to make a point, she just goes, oh, well, if you're leaving anyway, we'll totally take the table.
Yeah, no, there was a lot of really nice sort of kicks in the shins at good liberals in this book, in that section particularly. The middle section is my favorite part of the book. I remember the thing that we need to talk about that we haven't talked about before, which is the aliens.
Oh, yeah, well, because the aliens, again, they're just not very present.
Yeah, no, but like our hero's love interest, basically, since it's not Lisa.
Well, the thing is that it's sort of, she wants it to be Lisa, but the strongest emotional bond she has is definitely with the with this alien that does
non-binary.
This alien that does not conform to human genders. Yes,
this is for the Undertale Deltarune people out there. I got a big whack of Asriel / Rousey from this character, up to the point that he's this little white fluffy guy with tufts on him, and he's like cartoonishly nice and innocent and childish.
Even after they torture him. Even after they torture him multiple times in multiple locations.
I found him extremely creepy. I was convinced to begin with that where the book was moving was that the aliens were actually evil and had not blown up the Earth for the greater good. That was after I discarded the Earth hasn't actually been blown up, and then the Earth was blown up as a false flag, which were also ways that the book could have gone.
Mm-hmm. Which I'm glad, actually. Credit to them for not doing the false flag thing.
yeah, that would have been a real tough one to swallow. I'm glad that they didn't do that. Or rather, it would have been easier to swallow. It would have made the book more palatable, I think, and therefore worse. But,
right.
But he is so harmless and so like dedicatedly harmless that I was like, God, surely they're not playing this with a straight bat.
But they absolutely are. He is the guy who, when he's being tortured, he's like, I really wish you'd stop doing this. This is really unpleasant, but we can still be friends.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't understand characters like that. I don't understand what they're supposed to be doing in these books, because nobody is like that, you know? And if they are like that, there's something really bad going on underneath the surface, you know? I don't understand him, and I don't understand why Val essentially falls in love with the child, even, you know, regardless of what the actual ages are here. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, I mean, she's also incredibly emotionally underdeveloped, just in the opposite direction.
There is that, yeah.
Yeah, and he sort of remains a black box, which is unfortunate because, again, that's, you know, does end up being, if not a romantic love interest, like the core relationship of the book. So, yeah, it's too bad. And in general, this is also one of the things I first thought when I picked up this book is, oh, this is just that Tumblr post about what if humans were space orcs.
Yeah. Yeah. Much is made of how like large and physically intimidating humans are, which makes the aliens distrust them. And there seemed a little bit of sort of, there was a bit of a facile, oh, what if this trope but backwards, you know, right, thing to that, which I did not particularly enjoy.
Yeah, no, and I would have liked to get more insight into the mindset of somebody who can, you know, steadfastly want to be friends with the people who are torturing him.
Yes.
Who believes that everybody can be reasoned with. I mean, I suppose part of it is that this is somebody who's been raised in almost complete isolation and is so desperate for friends and also for something new and interesting in his life that he will accept torture as, if nothing else, it's a new experience and a chance to meet people.
Indeed.
That does make suddenly the book a lot darker, but really, his entire friendship with Kier is just incredibly dark, and I'm not sure the book realizes it.
That is correct. And this is a huge tangent, but one of the reasons that I'm very excited for the rest of Deltarune to come out is that I want to know if it knows what it's doing on that front also. Anyway, I think that this book is a failure.
Yes, but an interesting
it's an ambitious failure.
It's an ambitious failure.
And an interesting failure.
An interesting failure, and, you know, I'm still going to read whatever she writes next, and... I
think that I would really enjoy this author if she were to get away from, like, apocalyptic stakes and, you know, space opera plots.
I think you may enjoy Silver in the Wood. It has no apocalyptic stakes. It's about a relationship between a nerdy guy and the green man who, you know, who's a former highwayman turned forest spirit. I
do like green men.
Right.
Cool. All right, I will put that on my list. So I mean, what is next on our list?
Oh yes, we've kicked this poor book down the line enough times that I think The Mimicking of Known Successes is our next regular episode.
Cool. It's that one's short.
It's short. Yep.
it's certainly short. Yes, and we'll get to that. So until then, bye everybody.
Bye. Sorry.
I think we did fine. Welcome to the After the Podcast part of the podcast, where I get to do whatever I want. This week, because I actually really do like Neutral Milk Hotel, I would like to feature a incomprehensible in-joke that me and my internet son Olive produced, which is a cover of an outtake from In the Airplane Over the Sea. Enjoy. My dream girl don't exist. At the age of 5, she slit her wrist. Didn't know I'd be hanging around, so her parents buried her in the ground. And to this day I can hear the sound of her life in outer space. My dream girl don't exist. It's just you and I in this TV. And the stillness seems to feel so strange, like an engine that's about to hide. The moon up like a ball and chain, and sets its sands ablaze. And this weight is waiting on. Feel the world so real and strong. My dream girl don't exist. Just a photograph in a history book. And I believe she had a voice and name. 3 children on the coast of Maine. And her life was in a hurricane of love and real embrace. 'Cause I'm just a teenage dirtbag, baby. Yeah, I'm just a teenage dirtbag, baby. Listen to
Neutral Milk Hotel, Radiohead, My Bloody Valentine, Tame Impala, Vampire Weekend, The Beach Boys, Modest Mouse, Pavement, The Beatles, Mac DeMarco, Parquet Courts, The Doors, Beach House, Animal Collective, Joy Division, The Strokes, Arcade Fire, The Smiths, American Football, Fleet Foxes, The Velvet Underground, Arctic Monkeys, Oasis.
with me. My dream girl don't exist. At the age of 5 she slit her wrist. She didn't know I'd be hanging around, so one day she took a stroll to town and walked in front of a Greyhound bound for New York Central State. And the wait is waiting on. Feel the world so real and strong. She goes and now she knows that she'll never be afraid. Neutral Milk Hotel.